thank you everyone for joining us for today's lunchtime lecture, those at ODI HQ and those joining us online. Today we have our own Dr Dave Tarrant, who's going to be speaking on open data that has changed the world. Dave joined us from the University of Southampton and was responsible for creating one of the world's first undergraduate courses on open data. At the ODI, he's our training and learning expert, delivering a plethora of courses within the UK and internationally. And today he's going to be talking about the widespread and fantastic use cases around open data, showing how pivotal it is in shaping and changing the world that we live in. So over to Dave.
Thanks very much, Alex. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for joining us online. And actually, it might be the rewatch of the video that you might need in this particular one, as this might be a little bit of a soundbite. When we started at the ODI, we had about 2 or 3 stories that Nigel Shabbott, one of our founders, would go around telling everyone about. I'm glad to say today we have more than that, and so what I'm going to try and do today is cover quite a lot of them in terms of the different sectors, the different countries, but I'm only going to give you that top level high line, okay? So it's going to be very soundbitey, and you might want to go back and rewatch the video, pause, do a Google search, find the thing. So I'm going to try and do breadth rather than depth today, so I apologise for how quickly this might go. So it all started, as I just mentioned, with one of the stories, it all started with a bit of a bang, or rather than an earthquake, okay, which should hit about now. There we go. In Haiti, Port-au-Prince, if people remember, this is one of the things where open data really came to the fore around 800 edits on OpenStreetMap within 48 hours of this earthquake hitting, which was helping all the emergency services on the ground to find those people who needed that assistance and that rescue. And it just goes to demonstrate, especially today as we do even more around geographic data, how important having an open, both an open platform and open data is, in this case, in humanitarian response. Back in the UK, well, we did a bit with a number of councils, including Devon County Council. I like the fact that, basic things like parking spaces. Where can I park on the street? And this became one of the early data sets that was released from Devon County Council that lots of companies then kind of jumped upon and said, oh, this is actually really useful for finding people places to park in different towns throughout the county. So, different levels of usage. And talking about locations of things, we kind of got obsessed in this country with locations of toilets. The Great British Toilet Map's really come a long way since a few councils and communities contributing to it. And I love the fact that I've just got this screenshot yesterday, proudly sponsored by Domestos. Okay, the commercial buy-in to something that started as an open data activity. Talking of toilets, you can go further afield for this. Yes, I'm looking at astronauts going to the loo here. International Space Station has a huge amount of live open data feeds that you can tap into. This is an amusing one. There are obviously much more serious ones, but this is kind of being used to look more broadly about our planet. And so when we look at that, there's places like NOAA, people might have heard of them, doing an awful lot in terms of collecting and making open data available. And particularly when we want to look at our planet in terms of things like climate change, the impact of different land usage. We've got lots of stuff around coast, ocean, satellite data, loads and loads of stuff that the NOAA makes available, where we can take a really broad look at what we're doing to our planet. And this is one of the really big ones, especially as, well, what do we know about our planet? What do we know about our planet? And what's our kind of a knowledge and our assumption? So here's a question for you. What's the average number of children per family in Bangladesh today? Millionaire styley for the people in the room. 2, 3, 4, or 5? Okay, let's take a poll with the hands in the room quickly, and I'll give a broad indication for people online. 2? That's 1 person. 3? It's about 3 or 4 people. Okay, 4. That's more people again. I'm going up slowly. 5. So the majority of people went for 4 in that, okay? And the minority of people went for 2. What if I told you it was 2? What if I told you it was 2? Okay, it's shocking how much we don't know about our planet at the moment and how much we assume. And open data is really a good way of changing this, because there's loads that we can do with open data that's made available by different organisations. One of them being Gapminder. Now, for one of those of you who have heard of Gapminder before, you might have known that it was led by the incredible, thank you, because you got the question right. Okay, one person's going, I've heard of them. Yes, you got the question right. Excellent. Okay, so Gapminder was led by the amazing scientist, Professor Hans Rosling, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, is no longer with us. What I would like to show you is the power that open data had when it's presented in that way. So, ladies and gentlemen,
I'm going to give you my all-time favorite graph. I'm going to show you the history of 200 countries during 200 years in less than 1 minute. I have an axis for income. I have an axis for lifespan. I start in 1800, and there are all the countries. And back in 1800, everyone was down in the poor and sick corner. Can you see? Low lifespan, little money. And here comes the effect of the Industrial Revolution. Of course, the countries in West Europe, they are coming to better wealth, but they're not getting much healthier in the beginning. And those under colonial domination doesn't benefit anything in there. They remain there in the sick and poor corner. And now health is improving, health is slowly improving here. It's getting up here, and we are coming into the new century, and the terrible First World War, and then the economic recession after that, and then the Second World War. Oof. And now independence. And with independence, health is improving faster than it ever did in other countries here. And now starts the fast economic catch-up of China and other Latin American countries. They come on here, you know, and India is following there, and the African countries is also following. It's an amazing change that has happened in the world. You know, in the front here, we have now US and UK, but they're not moving so fast anymore. The fast movers are here in the middle. China is moving very fast to catch up. And Bangladesh, look, Bangladesh is already here, now quite healthy, and now starting with fast economic growth. And Mozambique, yes, Mozambique is back there, but they are now moving fast in the right direction.
It's a surprise, isn't it? But Bangladesh, I asked about the number of children in Bangladesh, their health in Bangladesh has improved, education in Bangladesh has improved, and this means that there's things like there's more children in school, there's better healthcare, better welfare, which means that there's 2 children per family. They only want 2. There is less child mortality. That situation has changed such a lot in the last couple of decades that it is difficult for us to actually keep up with what's going on in the world at the moment. And if I could recommend at least one thing after this session, go and watch this documentary, Don't Panic, The Truth About the Population. I love in this documentary, he asks that question about how many children in Bangladesh to British people off the street, just like I did. Okay, gets a series of results from them. He then asks it to leading British academics from universities who are teaching the next generation of people. I'm not going to tell you how well they do on the question. He then went to London Zoo and wrote 2, 3, 4 or 5 on bananas and gave them to monkeys, and got them to select what they thought. And I'm not going to tell you out of those 3 groups who knows the most about our planet. But it's all out there. The Gapminder Foundation, also there's other organisations. World Bank does a lot of this. FAO does a lot of this in agriculture as well. All of these organisations are collecting those key statistics and making them available for us all to look into. These are really, really key for looking at the future of our planet. Talking of education, we did a little project in Burkina Faso. I can play you this little one. Burkina Faso being one of the poorest countries on the planet, and again looking at how do we boost education. And this was looking at, they had a load of data actually on someone's laptop, which looking at things like facilities in schools, whether they've got running water, whether they've got loos, whether they've got power. This is the kind of the key things that we need for schools to be facilitating to people. This is the balance between gender balance between boys and girls in each school. So they are proactively looking at what's going on within our within their educational institutions and how those can be improved. I thought about this. This could change the face of charity, couldn't it? What if we could dial in with a comic relief or whatever it was and say, within the next half an hour, we're going to fit that school with running water? What if we could dial in that far? Okay, and actually you knew what you were donating towards. The data is out there, and we worked on that one. That's Burkina Faso. We also, one of the other projects that I love, so not just in education, but looking at housing. And this is a great project, Ramina Hararia. It's a mapping project. You can read the text there. I love the fact this is about education as well. It's about the local people doing it. It's not a company coming in. It's a local people who are creating this data in OpenStreetMap and using low-cost drones. I love the fact they're even collecting the 3D topography data off of these very low-cost drones and tuk-tuks to do the street data, and now they're using that in order to plan better development within the city against flood resilience. But the whole thing is collected by the community, and the education opportunity for those people in the city, in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, has been huge, the number of people engaged in this. I was honoured to go to their reception and meet most of the community who had done this and basically celebrate it with them. It was their achievement. And I love the fact, water and planning. So that one. In Singapore, the dengue maps are important, keeping people healthy. Okay, looking at dengue clusters, dengue fever cases, keeping the number of mosquitoes down. That's been a really important one. It's same sort of problem, different country, different type of economy, but similar problems. We just need to keep people happy. In this country, we have the problem with what day do the bins go out. Right, this is one. You get a leaflet through your door, right? Okay, from the council. Think how much that costs to print that leaflet. Okay, I love this particular one that was developed a little while ago. Got picked up on Radio 2 by Jeremy Vine, who said, "Can I please have one of these? It's much better than the leaflet and much cooler." So that was called the Bindicator. Okay, I quite liked that. Different things there. In terms of keeping us safe, a lot of the open data is also focused on crime statistics. Okay, in terms of what's going on in different cities. This is the one from Chicago. They publish it every week. We're now up to reported crimes, 6.8 million, just in this data set alone that's completely open for you. I wouldn't click the download button. You might have to leave your computer for the best part of a week. But you do have, in this particular platform, what I love about it is you can visualize the data in there. Just click the visualize button, filter it, do what you like with it, combine it with other data without having to download it. I love that idea. But, has that led to change? American deaths by terrorism, is that 1 star on there? Okay, 313. Total American deaths by firearms on US soil. Yeah, I need to add that many more to make the visualization accurate on that one. Did it actually cause a change? This was the main thing that Obama had in his presidency, was talking about this data. How much money do we plow into counter-terrorism? And how many lives does it actually save? Yeah, the balance there is if you draw the money investment on those two aspects, then it's an interesting difference. But that was one of the things that Obama was pushing during his administration. Keeping us healthy, we've done a lot with food standards, all of that food hygiene rating open data. If you use the apps like whatever the latest Just Eats and whatever they are, they will integrate that data to give you the awareness of where you're ordering from, what their standards are. We've got a lot from the NHS around trying to keep us a little bit more healthy. I'm not saying all of this is open, actually. It's more the calorie data in behind that comes from the NHS, which is more open than some of the stuff from the product manufacturers. But in terms of keeping us healthy, we're doing a big project here at the ODI, which I absolutely love. I think this one's going to have huge impact over the next couple of years. Called Open Active. If you haven't heard of it before, it's about getting people more active in their daily lives. And it now has 20% of the leisure operators in the UK publishing open data about what opportunities they have. The whole idea behind this is how come it's easier to book a restaurant table, talk to your watch, right, than it is to book a badminton court. Right? You can book a holiday to somewhere else in the world quicker than you can book a badminton court down the road from you. Right? So what we should do there, create the data ecosystem around it. So we've now got over 170,000 opportunities for much being published. You can see the growth, at the end of last year, where a lot of the main operators started buying in and publishing their opportunities. Startup community starting to get hold of this, and also Activity Finder in London from Change for Life. 4 million people and 98% of state-funded primary schools engage with this to find activities for that age category, and they've just recently integrated all of the open active data in London into the tool. So it's showing how where the data can reach into those different communities to try and keep us healthy. One of my particular favourites, adding a bit to sport, is going into transport, getting there. This is one of the big ones that most people have heard about in terms of how many apps use and rely on open transport data. It's one of those things that even Transport for London, they realise that the data that they publish is as important as the physical infrastructure. That's why we talk about a lot here at the ODI as data being infrastructure, as important as the roads, as the tube lines. If we don't have that data infrastructure, how do we know what red bus to catch? Where do they go? How do I get to the ODI? You may use Google Maps or City Map, but you're all using the open data. And what I love about it is all of the signs at bus stops are using the open data. It's that one infrastructure now. Okay, it's really helped them. But it helps those different markets as well. I love this Station Master app. Gives you like the exits of tube trains and distances to platforms and number of steps, exits, number of steps at each exit. This is actually there and all the accessibility data. This is improving on the disabled tube map. If you look at the London Disability Tube map, it's basically got an icon of a wheelchair on each station. That's it. That's the disability data for the tube map. But there's so much more than that in terms of accessibility requirements for different types of abilities. And this is a really great app that was developed using open data. And then they collected all of this type of data as well and contributed it back to TfL, and they actually did this at every single door, which is ridiculous. So the level of granularity you can get. I love that transport's even getting to the level. This is the benefit for London, 130 million and rising in yearly benefit from this data. So the benefit of the data being open is much greater than the benefit of the data not being open. Okay. I love the fact that you can really geek out on this because you can go for things like on the national network. Most people use this to find out what platform their train's going from. But if you're going from something like King's Cross or Euston, where they announce it right at the last minute and you have to run, if anyone's got that experience, you can use something like this. Now you can get live signal map diagrams, right? If you really want to go into it that much, this is all open data and is absolutely 100% live. So you can follow every train's signals, you can see the colours of them all. It's all open data. It goes beyond that whole simple. That's opentraintimes.com. If you want that one, really useful when things go wrong. Okay, really, really useful. Okay, it's what they see in the signal box. Talking of transport, anyone remember this story? Car emissions under real driving conditions. Remember the was it the Volkswagen story? I am accusing the right company, aren't I? Yes, the Volkswagen story. Okay, where they can detect when they're on a machine, therefore the emissions come down. Right. This is the EQUA index, which is the one that's taken under genuine driving conditions. Okay, so you can see here, it's not just Volkswagen. There's a lot of cars that have a high Euro 5 and a good rating, but when it comes to the EQA rating, it's more down in the G's and the H's rather than the A stars. Under the genuine, that's all open data that you can go and download if you want to, as well, off of that index. Okay, so giving us that kind of idea of what the emissions and how we're actually damaging the planet in that kind of way. Talking of air quality, let's go back over to Mexico. What was interesting here is that some people found through government procurement data that when they were planning things like urban forests and urban green spaces, they were actually buying all of the same tree. The problem with that is you're killing the habitat that was there. You need a variation of habitat, not just buy the cheapest tree over and over again. So it was the procurement that showed that they were actually still not doing much better. Right, just by planting some trees, it didn't help the habitats that used to be in those parts of the city, with Mexico City being one of the biggest in the world now. Again, came through an investigation in open data. Talking of cities, open corporates is another big one that's made a big shake-up. It's one of the early companies that we incubated here at the ODI. And we did a little bit of work with them on them being the Facebook of companies. Now, you've got to think about that for a second. The Facebook of companies. Facebook knows who your friends are, right? It knows your linkages to who's who knows what. What happens if you do that for companies and all of the different branches of a company? Well, that means you can do something like follow the money. Who owns who and where are they based across the entire world? Okay, so open corporates are now the biggest index of open corporate data. Okay, including ownership, beneficial ownership data, all of that. And you can do things like find out who owns what the relationships are between different companies, and follow the money from, on the right-hand side there, on the left-hand side there, the country in blue. US country that looks like a bit like a strongman. Cayman Islands. Yeah, look how big it is. Okay, this is Goldman Sachs' graph when we did it a few years ago. But, kind of like, once you get all the company data together in one place, how does the due diligence change and your opinion change of those companies? And that's something that open corporates have been doing a lot of. They're now based in Canary Wharf, unsurprisingly, in fintech, doing a lot down there. Where am I going next? Talking of cities, talking of money, actually. Open banking. So it's Canary Wharf, there is a link. Open banking, a lot of people might have seen this appear in your apps. Okay, your bank might have been talking about it. It's actually something that we started here. The whole idea behind it was people don't get enough choice and ease of switching. in terms of their accounts. So we got the Competition Markets Authority, we're a big player in this one. What we wanted them to do essentially was to get banks to open up more data about rates, mortgage rates, lending rates, etc., so that people could have a wider choice, an easier choice to make. It kind of happened the other way around in the fact that you have to give the banks data about you and then they tell you what the best product is, rather than the other way around. Okay, but still to the same sort of outcome of being a bit more open. And of course, this is a good example under GDPR of the right to transfer your data, right to portability from one provider to another. So, and you know, the bank's leading in that particular aspect, okay, which is kind of nice to see as well at the same time. Sticking with money, saving money for governments, local councils. South Australian government showed that through proactive release of open data, they saved $3.2 million in a single year on answering FOI requests. Because most of them that came in, they could go, it's already out there, it's there, it's there, it's there. You know, and you're no longer having to gather and update. The proactive release saved them, $3.2 million in a year. Okay, so open data and FOI, we still need FOI, it's important, but the relationship between them can save governments an awful lot of money. And then finally, we gamified open data. I like that. I like the fact that if you haven't seen the Open Data Barometer before, great study done by the Web Foundation in terms of looking at countries and how they're doing with their open data initiatives, measuring things like impact, readiness, okay, measuring things like what the activities that are going on that support those open data initiatives. This is this year's Open Data Barometer. It's the first year the UK has not been on top. Okay, what does that tell you? I'll leave you to judge that. What it does tell me one thing, however, is the fact that the Canadians have been after this top rank for years. Okay, I've had emails in my inbox because I helped do some of the visualizations for this, so I had early access to the data under embargo, and I had an email from the Canadian government one year going, where are we? Please tell us where we are before it's released. I'm like, no. Okay, they've been literally trying to get on the top of the barometer for the last 4 years. Okay, so actually, and that's about releasing data, getting the impact, driving it within society. So actually, changing the way that governments view it, and it's no longer a chore, it's a game. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's a really brief whistle-stop tour around quite a lot. Okay, but I thought I might end on one of my favourites. Okay, just silly in this country. The LiDAR data. Has anyone seen this? It was released from the Environment Agency a little while back. Okay, and the LiDAR data is what the Environment Agency use in order to do their own kind of flood mapping. This is really important now within cities, especially when we build our gardens now. We kind of concrete them over or put decking in or put artificial grass with concrete underneath. It means that we're having a problem with runoff. That's why we're having more flooding in cities, because there's less drainage in a city. Okay, so that's how they use it. Okay, again, city planning. Maybe we need to do the stuff that they've done in Tanzania. Okay, but the LiDAR data set is one of those that was released, and I really love some of the creative usage that people did with this. Things like wind modelling through a city. Okay, that's kind of obvious. Archaeology. Finding a Roman road and a Roman villa because its top can penetrate through the top layer. So digital archaeology, great for that, this data set. Educational games, Minecraft. People built Minecraft maps. I say educational games gets kids involved in city planning, knock blocks down, rebuild things. Okay, really great kind of use of the data. But just to finish off, this is my particular favourite with the LiDAR data. Working out in the light of the data, where's the best place to plant grapevines in the UK so that we can beat the French at their own game and produce better wines than they can. And that's something I can drink to. Cheers.
Thank you, Dave. There were some really brilliant use cases and examples of open data there. We are going to open for some questions now. Please bear in mind that I will be passing you the mic, and please wait for the mic before you do ask a question, just so everyone at home can hear us. It will not amplify your voice, so don't expect that to happen. So yeah, does anyone have any questions to kick off?
Hey, that was fantastic. Thank you. Really, really interesting. As you kind of alluded to, one of the key things with working with data to sort of affect change and make an impact is actually getting the attention of policymakers and leaders in government.
Yeah.
This is quite a broad question, so answer it how you want. But do you find, what kind of data stories do you find actually grab attention from people who can introduce new policies, or who wants to take an issue and own it and then create change on the basis of that?
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for the question. Now, the interesting thing is, so I've got a list here of all the stories I included, right? And there's also a list of ones that I didn't, that I've crossed through on the slide. Okay, there, when I was putting the slides together, there's more. This is just the list I came up with in my head, okay, the other day. There are loads more than this. What I was trying to do was sector coverage. When one of the ones that I didn't cover today that's crossed out, the first one on the left-hand side there is the London fire story. Okay, this one really rings with policymakers because it's one that people really attach to. And this was about, in London in 2012, the London Fire Brigade was asked to close 10 to 13 fire stations in order to save money. People remember this story? Immediate reaction to that from a majority of people is that that's going to affect the performance of the London Fire Brigade and thus people's lives. Yeah, and the safety of people within London. Okay. Now, the good thing is we'd run a course here called Better Data, Better Decisions, where this data set is central to that, and we look at the analysis around, is that true? Okay, what does the data actually show? What kind of decision does it lead to? And so we do that a lot. I actually run a course within the Civil Service Learning Programme with government policymakers that focuses on, well, how do you address all the concerns that people have around this, and how do you create an open tool, right, and put the data out there that enables you to engage with those stakeholders and making a more intelligent, informed policy decision with everybody. Okay, so that's another key one that I didn't include in here, but it's one of the key ones that rings with the policymakers that we work with within government, is the fact that that's a real story where 10 fire stations were closed. We can look at the data today that was published last month by the London Fire Brigade. If you want to go and have a look what the impact was, you can all go and do that right after my talk. Just load it up in Excel and create a pivot table. That's all you need. Okay, providing your laptop can load a few 100,000 rows of data. Okay, but it's all out there. But that one chimes very true with policymakers. Hope that helps. Sorry, I just didn't include it. I knew there'd be a question about one I didn't include. Yeah.
Hello. Thanks for the presentation. That was great. You gave lots of examples whereby government data was released, and I can see there's so many arguments for the benefits to society, economy, and so forth. Do you have any examples that come to mind of private companies, particularly medium or large companies, who have a lot of data that they hoard, like a pitch or a way that to convince them? Like, what are the key arguments, or are there any examples that you have?
Yeah, there are a key, and again, I didn't include these in this presentation mainly because of the title. Okay, there's a lot of changes happening in the commercial sector at the moment, but what tends to happen with this is open data tends to be driven by two agendas. One is transparency, right, and one is economic growth. Okay. So we've seen about the transparency agenda, accountability. I didn't really go into things like MP's expenses and all of that lot. Okay, but it tends to be where open data initiatives start. Did in this country, MP's expenses was a big one around the government transparency. It's interesting for commercial organisations. It's tended to start in the same place, so they tend to want to start with being a bit more transparent. Okay, that doesn't necessarily lead to any innovation externally. It just leads to, that I can read more into the environmental impact this company's having because they're publishing data on their energy and that kind of thing. A lot of companies do that. Okay, we have worked with a number of companies at the ODI who have gone a few steps further. Okay, one of the main ones has actually been Thomson Reuters / Refinitiv. Okay, so they've just split a little bit. And Thomson Reuters, as you know, are a company that have historically done a lot to gather data and sell services on to others, and so they could see open data as a threat to their business model, if you like. Okay, and what we help them do is turn it around into an opportunity in their business model. Okay, key to that was making them realise that their customers actually wanted more open data so they could integrate it in business-to-business relationships, so that when they're talking about different entities, different companies, they know that they're talking about the same thing. Okay, they know they're talking about that same entity of that same company, and we help them with an identifiers project where they released identifiers in all of their data for everyone to use openly, but enough data about each of those identifiers to know what they are. And they made that all open, which means there's less friction in the business-to-business transactions between other companies when they're using the Thomson Reuters data. There's a certain amount of the data that can now flow completely openly. So, in terms of that, it was growing a better business-to-business kind of ecology. So that's one of the main ones that we work with Thomson Reuters on. We have done a little bit of work with Syngenta. Okay, but you have to remember in Open Active, we've also got the commercial sector. Right, Open Active has got all of the providers of data that hold all of those opportunities, and they have that business model of people have to come to our website and look at the PDFs on our website and book it using our website. And which again, it's changing those business models a little bit, but not too much. To say open up the data, and then what we'll have, what we're working on at the moment in phase 3 of Open Active, is the booking API. How do people turn that opportunity into a click to a booking? That means it goes through your system. There's still a revenue as you're still handling the credit cards and the revenue, okay? But the opportunity discovery is now through other sites. So again, think of it like in a way like your booking.coms. You fill it all in on there, but eventually the money ends up with the providers, those different airfare operators, the different things, and there is a cut taken. Okay, so we've been working on those kind of business models, and again, a lot of them are very resistant to it, and that's why it's been a 2.5 year program already. 20%, not too bad. We think it's going to grow rapidly.
Thank you for the talk. So some companies are resistant, others are not very resistant in the sense that they would take open data.
Yeah.
Let's assume a mapping tool.
Yeah.
And this data is created by us, by you guys, curated by you, is enclosed in private companies' platforms, and nothing is given back except a paid product. So how do you solve that?
Sorry, can I just clear that up again to make sure I'm getting it right?
Let's say Citymapper collects data about the presence of people across the city and is providing a paid tool, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't give anything back. So it gets the open data and enclose this open data into their own databases, for example. So why we don't get anything back?
What, from Citymapper?
Yeah, for example, for any private company in general, right?
I mean, I would say that it's completely opposite is true in transport, right? Completely the opposite is true in transport because of the fact that you look at the model, what is transport's model is to provide public transport services to users who get on buses and trains, etc. The more opportunity that there is to find those connections, those links, means that more people can get on a red bus. Okay, so think about people from different cities around the world who come to London. Do they have to know which website to go to? No, they just use Google. They just use the whatever the Chinese equivalent is that ingests all the same data. And eventually they end up on the bus, hopefully. So for TfL, the business model is very clear. There's more people that can get access to that data, right? The more people might potentially take our transport and kind of invest in our services in terms of getting on board, essentially buying a ticket. So those kind of things are very clear. Same thing is happening within the sports sector. Right, what we're trying to say there is eventually it comes down to the number of bookings, number of people using the services. So we need to find those opportunities. Okay, and previously it's happened. If we look at Booking.com and the travel sector, that's quite a closed model. There's not many people who else can get involved without getting into the community itself. You can't really innovate within it as easily as you might be able to within transport or within what we're trying to do with sport. So it's looking for those touch points in terms of what's the value that those companies really want, and how do we build an ecosystem where they get that back. The problem comes when you try and take the data away. That's when the real problem comes. When you try and say to the leisure operators, for example, what we're going to do is you're going to give us all your data, right, and then we're going to build everything, which means it takes the management ownership away from the data. What we're saying to those leisure operators is, no, we're helping your platforms to become more open. You can procure whichever platform you want. It'll just be part of the ecosystem. You're still doing all the same stuff underneath. We're not coming along and taking over. Okay, we're just encouraging you to create a richer ecosystem. Same companies, same people. So those are the kind of the models that we try and head for. And it's that we don't want to take the data away. It's empowering people to build a stronger community, a stronger ecosystem.
Thank you. I was very interested in your comments about the growth of ODI. 50 years ago, I took my first job working for which was at a similar level of the growth. It had gone from half a dozen people working out of a garage to a respected magazine.
Yeah.
This was based mainly on the accidental discovery that people liked to fill in questionnaires. The manufacturers' attitudes were so arrogant that anybody who was asked for their view loved it. Right, that has grown and grown, and we are now in a situation of feedback back fatigue.
Yeah.
Particularly when you go to your doctors and get asked for a questionnaire to be filled out, because the amount of money that the practice gets depends in part on this.
Yeah.
Do you see that there will be a similar problem with open data, where the growth is no longer sustainable and we want our leaders to work more on gut reaction than facts and figures?
Interesting question. I would compare it more to the evolution of the web. Okay, remember that Tim Berners-Lee being our founder here at the ODI, I would compare it more to the evolution of the web. The web is something, my very first slide on my whole talk, okay, was Tim Berners-Lee at the London 2012 opening ceremony saying this is for everyone, right? Creating that fair, open ecosystem where everyone has the opportunity to both innovate and create other services. Now, what we've got to with the web is we've got to a stage where it's evolved really quickly to a point where we're now having to ask questions about what does that look like when, have we got companies trying to take control of parts of the web now, right? And what can we do about that? Okay, does there need to be other sorts of regulation around our uses of the web? And I would see that as open data being on the same pathway in terms of we're trying to make it equality, fair, open for everyone, right? Not a load of closed ecosystems. What's that going to mean, right, at the tipping point that the web has sort of got to, if you like? What's that going to mean there? And I think we're going to have a lot to learn, right, in terms of, which is why we do a lot at the ODI in terms of ethics. Okay, we base that on what's happening around us in the web and in personal data, because we want to know, right, those lessons that need to be learned so that we're aware of what those tipping points and annoyances are, right? But I think personally, and I think here at the ODI, it's going to be closer to the way that the web's evolved, open and for everyone, right, than necessarily how other services have evolved.
Thank you. Given that we're generally quite good with open data in this country, why do we have such a challenge with open address data and the Geospatial Commission?
Elephant in the room. Elephant in the room right there. So as most of you might be aware, when the government sold off the Royal Mail, they also sold off the postcodes address file. So they sold off the database behind it as well. So they sold off the piece of infrastructure that makes it run. Okay. So rather than just selling off the delivery processes in the final quarter of a mile, as they call it, they sold off the data set that went with it. Okay, we were one of the organisations like shouting very loudly at the government, "You'll regret that." Okay, don't do it. Okay, however, that didn't happen. It's interesting that they've put in several policies since saying, oh, we need to put money in place to recreate it, because now they've realised that they've got third-party right problems across all of the land registry data, the Ordnance Survey data. All of this has a third-party right in it now. Okay, how does that affect the openness of our infrastructure and the way that our country can build its infrastructure? It's a problem. So that was a decision that was taken badly, as it were. What I find interesting is other companies don't source off of that data set anymore. When it was in government ownership, they also loop into it and make it the same service that they do for their address finder. There's lots of other companies now that are trying to build their own databases because they don't want to give money to their competitors. Right, so you might have used some of the delivery companies where you type in a postcode and it goes, I don't know what that is, please can you tell me? And then they add that to their database. So there are other companies that are kind of building it. What would be interesting to find out, and we have tried here a little bit at the ODI, but maybe too early, was what does it look like when a series of those companies get together and say, well, we'll put it back out there. Okay, we'll amalgamate our databases together to make a stronger one and do that openly, as opposed to having lots of niche ones, okay, that only have a certain coverage. I think we'll still see an evolution in that, especially as Ordnance Survey are being challenged to open up more and more of their mapping data. We're going to see an evolution of that within the UK. But it's interesting when you've got other countries doing these kind of things. They can look at the UK and go, it taught us a lot of things. Some of them good, some of them bad.
Any other questions for Dave? I have a question about the work that we've done in Tanzania, and kind of what the components were to make that such a successful project. Aspects around data literacy or on top of the open data, but what are the other components that go with that to make things successful? It doesn't just happen.
Yeah, I didn't really touch on this in the presentation because I'm doing that typical British thing and not trying to boast too much. But thank you, Alex, for setting that one up. So within Tanzania, we ran... so Amina Harare wasn't us, but it was going on at the same time. What we were asked to do within Tanzania by the World Bank and also MCC with two different projects was to kind of help them boost their literacy around open data, right? Because looking at the indicators, as Hans Rosling does, you know, you need education, equality, etc. So we were really focused on the education part and helping them realize the benefits of the open data. And what we did in Tanzania was to work with 3 different agencies around health data, education data, and nutrition data. So those 3 indicators again that Hans Rosling mentioned in his video, okay, working around the open data in those and what the benefits can be. And while we were doing this, we were looking for our next trainers. The idea was, after doing a bit of in-country engagement for about 18 months, we were looking for people who could become the educators in-country, right, to maintain, right, the literacy education. And through the MCC funding, we set up and helped set up the D-Lab, the Tanzania Data Lab. Probably one of my proudest moments ever is in the setting of that up, helping train 8 ODI registered trainers up to a level where those trainers have now gone on to train over 1,000 people in the last year in Tanzania, across all 18 regions of Tanzania, and they're starting to actually embed open data within their policy making. The Department of Education did that this year. Okay, we were embedding it. And so we had the project reviewed by Luminate, who are a rename of Media. They reviewed the project because they wanted to look at the impact and what kind of impact it had. And the reviewer came back to the country after being out in Tanzania for a while, and he gave us the following quote. This is the highest impact project I've seen in the global training project I've seen in the Global South, without reservation. Okay, it took us a while, but it was about building community. It was about identifying those people who can go on to train the next generation of people. Okay, and if you want to look it up, just go on the Tanzania Data Lab Twitter. Okay, you can find out that a couple of days ago they did a big event around women in data, right? Okay, and that was taught by 2 women, 2 of our ODI registered trainers who are women in the country. And if you look at the equality and what that means, that's a big thing. Okay, so yeah, I'm particularly proud of that one. I didn't want to go into it too much. I love Amina Harare as well. That's another great project, nothing to do with us, but a brilliant project. But yeah, it's that kind of thing that we've been doing internationally and looking for those next opportunities. We've just started a little bit in Nepal, okay, but again, we'll see how that goes. It took us 2.5 to 3 years to do the Tanzania effort to build it up to the level of being completely self-sustainable. Okay, and the data lab, the Tanzania data lab, has gone from 1 room in a building at the University of Dar es Salaam to 4 rooms, 3 breakout spaces, 3 offices, an entire outdoor space, and it's all painted. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Anyway, thank you, Alex.
Are there any other questions? I think we'll wrap up. It's okay?
Yeah,
so
I'm sticking around for a bit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave. Thank you for everyone for joining us. And yeah, as Dave said, I think he's got some cards over there as well, if anyone wants to get in touch. But thank you.
Thank you, everyone.